I'm sorry. What am I thinking of?
For some reason they won't do Airbnb. So we've been looking for a house.
Okay, I'm
So
sorry.
that's why I went to a house.
Have some private.
Oh, yes, that's right.
Because we want house.
Is it in your folder?
So because we have a
Looks familiar.
seventh grader that will be
It's familiar, but the wrong familiar to me, yeah.
where we're looking at.
Online.
We've not been able to-
All right, welcome everyone today, tonight. We're going to start off with a special recognition today. So for that, I'm going to turn it over to Superintendent Funk.
Okay, I'd like Niall Creasel to come on up, and Lowell Thompson, why don't you come on up as well? Sorry, we don't have the music playing for you. Come up here. Come on up this side so everybody can see you. You guys, come on up. Jerry, Buzz, you guys come on up here too. Or take pictures.
I can take, well, yeah.
Is this
Do you want
okay?
me to take it so you can be in the picture?
Is this okay?
Yeah, but if you want to be in the picture.
I can get close up there.
Okay, so who we have in front of us here is Niall Creasel. Niall is a student in the class of 1958. And Niall was really brought to my attention by Lowell, and I'm going to have Lowell say a few words here in a minute. But, in my superintendent report tonight, I'm going to talk about graduation rates, and we'll talk about our high school graduation rate, and I'm going to talk about our alternative high school graduation rate. You guys didn't have an alternative high school back in 1958, did you?
No,
Okay.
unfortunately.
Unfortunately not. And
It
so,
was called the Navy.
so when Lowell brought this to my attention, he brought up all sorts of information. And with it, he brought the fact that Niall was 1 credit short of his needed graduation requirements. So what did he do? He ended up going into the Navy afterwards. And so he went to the Navy, got out of the Navy. Then he decided to go to college, and he went to the University of Wisconsin, River Falls, and he got a Bachelor of Science with a major in accounting and a minor in sociology. He's taken a total of 60 college courses since high school. Not only did that, he went back and got his GED test and passed that. He got a certificate of secondary school equivalence from Stillwater High School in 1969. Because of his performance at River Falls, he was invited to the honors program. As he graduated from River Falls, he received a letter from the Dean of the Graduate School of Business at Madison, encouraging Niall to pursue a graduate degree in business administration due to his fine academic record. He worked 23 and a half years for the city of Stillwater as the city administrator and as finance officer. He was elected Washington County Commissioner, and he's been a member of various community organizations, Lions, Eagles, Elks, American Legion, and on and on. So this is an example for all of our students, who may fall a little short initially, who can go on and make a difference in the world. So Niall, I normally have something prepared to say here that, something about, you've met the requirements of the state of Minnesota. So here we are, approximately 55 years later, 65 years later, I don't know how many years. 65 years later, you have met the requirements of this school district based upon your life achievement, and therefore I'd like to give you this diploma for the class of 1958.
Thank you, Doctor.
Congratulations.
When I discovered that Niall had not gotten his diploma, but he had 60 college credits, any one of which would have met the 1 credit he had short. He admits he wasn't a great high school student, okay? But he has certainly redeemed himself with his record at college. And he was the face of City Hall here in Stillwater for 23 years.
Yeah.
He was both finance officer and city administrator. He held both positions.
Wow.
Which is, most cities have 2 people who hold positions. So when I discovered that, I talked to Dr. Funk and said, there's got to be something. And I know that this means a lot to Niall. I know of no one that graduated from Stillwater High School or came out of this community that is more loyal, more glad that he grew up in this community. He's a pony forever, and now he can wear the red.
That's awesome.
Wow, man. Madam Chair, Dr. Funk, all you distinguished people, my two brothers. Having graduated from River Falls 50 years ago, for some reason, having this in my hand, I now feel like the strong man from the Wizard of Oz. Finally got a brain. 2 years ago, I became an octogenarian, and today I can spell octogenarian, and I just pronounce it. So I guess I learned something in high school. Very appreciative of Dr. Funk, what you've done, and certainly what a remarkable man he is. I would look at his resume, and 30-some years in National Guard, 2022 Superintendent of the Year. By the way, that's where I got my start in the National Guard. So I really appreciate it. And you know, you go through life, you develop friendships, but along comes a friend like Oral Thompson, and you know, you can't get any luckier. Like Lowell said, he found out a couple years ago, we kind of reconnected from high school, started playing golf together, and he heard the story about my having not graduated because of the one credit short, maybe a little bit more because I did make up some, but I really appreciate it, Lowell. And you know, that was your mission, and you accomplished it for me, so I appreciate it. You know, I was not a very good high school student, I have to admit that, but still I had a good school system. It must have, because it prepared me for 6 years in the military, got a degree at River Falls, was able to go on to become Stillwater Administrator, County Commissioner, and so it's a good school system. It's actually been very good to my family. My two brothers and our children produced 3 West Point graduates, a graduate from Duke University, graduate from Oberlin College, 2 graduates from University of Minnesota, and 2 graduates from Iowa State, so it's a good system. And we were very fortunate to move to Stillwater in 1950, and all the people here at the school system give us the opportunity to live a fruitful life, a fulfilled life, and it just doesn't get any better than that, so I appreciate everything. I really respect the board for 2 reasons. One, for hiring Dr. Funk and some of the other good people here, but also for what the challenges that you face today. You know, I'm 82 years old, and I've never seen the issues facing schools as they see today. So I think that's about it. Very appreciative.
I guess get the red kind of behind you instead of the screen, if that's okay.
Yeah.
Picture of them all together.
Keep up the good work.
One other thing I'd like to point out, if you go to the old high school, which burned down my senior year, at the entrance to the Veterans Memorial, you'll see 6 paver blocks. Brother Buzz, Brother Gary, myself, his 2 sons, and my son, all military veterans. Very proud
Oh,
of that.
nice. Very cool.
And over here too, get a picture of all of you.
Here, Gary, come on, man.
I'm gonna be next. Oh.
Yeah, definitely will. All right, everybody kind of crowd together in there. You want to hold up your diploma? Gotta see that. That's what this is all about, right?
I love it. That's
I'm
awesome.
gonna take one more here. Okay. Did you open it up? Is that really your name in there?
We got evidence now.
All right, thank you.
All right.
Awesome, this means a lot.
Congratulations.
Thanks for coming, guys. You bet. Thanks, buddy. You bet. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, this distinguished group. Thanks for serving. Pete, thanks for everything.
He graduated 58, right?
Niall?
Yeah, thank you. My neighbor
Yeah.
graduated.
Who? What's his name?
Roger Groth.
That sounds familiar.
Because they had their reunion at the same time my daughter's having a graduation party, 60 years apart. I wanted to ask him if we got meeting.
How you doing, Sharon? You're the best. God, I love you guys.
Well, thank you so
The
much.
school
This was so
district is
fun.
really hitting on
This
all
was-
cylinders.
Yeah, this was so fun. Yeah.
Awesome. Keep
Thank you
up
for
the good.
coming.
Let me know what I can do for that referendum.
Yes.
Thank you.
How you students doing? 82 and I'll get your diploma.
He graduated with my neighbor.
That's so cool. I wonder if he knows him.
He's curious, could ask him.
Oh, cool. Great. Okay, well, that was really incredible. We're going to move on to public comment, and we have one speaker this evening, and that is Katie DeGroot. Katie DeGroot? We'll call one more time. Our only public speaker is Katie DeGroot. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. Okay. All right. So we will move on to calling our meeting to order. Yes, okay. No Katie, so we'll move on now to our meeting. Joan, roll call.
Director Hockert. Here. Director Kelsenberg.
Here?
Director Lauer.
Here.
Director Petrie. Here. Director Porbeni.
Here.
Director Thelander.
Here.
Chair Sherman.
Here.
You have a quorum.
Great. All right, let's stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, we'll move on to our student reports.
Okay, I can start with our sports report.
Love agenda.
Oh, I'm sorry. One more thing. Oh, I don't have that on.
That seemed a little quick.
Yeah, I did.
We have to approve the agenda.
Do we approve the
Oh,
agenda?
there it is. Approval of the agenda. I will move to approve the agenda. My bad. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay, Director Hocker. All those in favor of approving the agenda, raise your hand and say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion passes unanimously. Now we'll move on to the student report.
Okay, I can do our sports report. It has been a very challenging spring season so far, but our pony teams keep plugging along. The next 2 weeks are very busy as we make up postponed contests. Girls lacrosse is off to a 2-1 start with wins over Roseville and Irondale and a close loss to number 3 Prior Lake. They will travel to East Ridge tomorrow and host Creighton Durham Hall on Friday. Boys lacrosse is also 2-1 with wins over Roseville and Irondale with a loss to number 1 Benilde St. Margaret's. They will host East Ridge tomorrow and travel to Creighton on Friday. The softball team remains unbeaten with wins over Forest Lake and Mounds View. They will host East Ridge tomorrow, travel to Woodbury on Thursday, and head to White Bear Lake on Friday. The baseball team bounced back from a tough loss against Woodbury with a win over Park. They will host White Bear Lake tonight, East Ridge tomorrow, travel to Irondale on Thursday, and head over to Creighton on Friday. Our synchronized swim ended their figures part of the schedule with a win over Maple Grove. They begin the routines part of the schedule traveling to Columbia Heights on Thursday. Our golf teams will finally get out and compete this week. The boys will compete each day the rest of the week. The girls team competes Tuesday and Thursday. The boys tennis team is quietly having a great season after dropping a close 4-3 decision to Mounds View last week. They have beaten Park, Roseville, and Forest Lake. They travel to Creighton today, Matamita tomorrow, host White Bear Lake on Thursday, and head to Rochester Friday and Saturday. Congrats to the cast and crew of the musical Newsies. We are so lucky to have such talented performers. They were fantastic. Boys and girls track have also been competing as much as the weather has allowed. The girls travel to Roseville today, and the boys are at Lakeville South on Thursday.
Okay, and I have the student update. As the school year begins to come to a close and AP testing nears, many students have begun the endless hours of studying to prepare for the exams. In order to find ways to relieve stress of testing, students have partaken in watching the school play Newsies, which just wrapped up with their last performances this past weekend. In the next month, there is Spring Coffee House hosted by NHS and fun activities sponsored by the Student Council such as Spike Ball and Senior Sunset to look forward to. Many students are holding on to the hopes for warmer temperatures as their motivation to make it through the rest of the semester.
Great, thank you guys. Any questions? Okay, we'll turn it over to Superintendent Funk for his update.
So the graduation rates came out today for the state of Minnesota, and some good news for Stillwater. Our four-year graduation rate at Stillwater High School was 96%, 96.23, which was up slightly over a point from the class of 2021.
our St. Croix Valley Area Learning Center, and this is what I was talking about earlier, had a 4-year graduation rate of 47.7%. That's up over 5 points from 2021. But the interesting thing here, and this is why it was real good that Niall was here, if you look at the graduation rates, 4-year, 5-year, and 7-year at our ALC, you can see how they go up significantly over time. Some of our students, because of life challenges, just need some more time to get things together in their lives and help them, work through some other things as they're continuing to work towards graduation. So I think it's a real positive to see that 85% of our students at the ALC are graduating in 7 years. Unfortunately, what the state likes to show is the 4-year graduation rate, and you really have to go and dig to try and find the 5 and the 7-year rate. And the other thing is that the state utilizes, they look at your 4-year rates when determining whether or not you have to be identified as needing extra help as a school district because of the fact that you have a low graduation rate in your ALC. And the purpose of the ALC isn't an alternative education, and some kids may need some more time. So good news, I think, all around. But I just wanted to highlight for the board and the public that our kids do keep on working past 4 years in the ALC, and the vast majority of them are successful.
Great. Thank you very much. That's really helpful information. I don't think we've seen that before as a board, so thank you. Any questions for Superintendent Funk? Seeing none, we'll move on to my report, and I don't have anything tonight. So we're going to go on to the consent agenda. There are items that will be on the screen here, right? A through H. Is there a motion to pass tonight's consent? We'll go with Dr. Porbeni and then a second with Director Petrie. All those in favor of approving tonight's consent agenda, raise your hand and say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion passes unanimously. Now we'll move on to our action items, and we're going to start with insurance renewal information 2023-2024, and for that we'll welcome Bob Graff.
Good evening.
Yeah, good evening.
Rates. You want to start with the rates? There we go. All right. So with our benefit year, coming to an end at the end of June, starts in July, this is the time of renewal and open enrollment for our employees. And so here we have the rates that we're proposing for the new year. And I have a small presentation that will follow this to explain, why the increases and a little bit about the plan itself. But you can see we have a sizable increase that was handed to us this year with the health insurance, about a 13% increase, which is not fun, but it's indicative of the claims data that we've had, the experience that we've had within the plan over the last year. So we've really seen an increase that I'll get into a little bit here. So, do you want to go to the presentation? What's that? Okay, thank you. You can start right there. Thank you, Chris. Okay. So a quick high-level summary of what we're looking at here. Our claims are running at about 101% of the expected. So as you know, the health plan has an expected expense every year, and then the amount of funding that comes in through the premiums and or the employer contributions. So we're running at about 101% the claims over the expected. So that's right on target, actually, with just a little bit higher than than what we had planned for the expected. But claims on a per member basis are up 18% from this time from the previous year. So that's an 18% claim per member basis. So that's a pretty significant jump in expenses for us. Most significant opportunities, I'll say, for our plan going forward are going to center around education and helping our members become better consumers of the plan itself. Some simple examples of what I'm talking about: point of care, something as simple as not using the emergency room if you've got a sore throat, maybe calling the nurse's line or waiting to go see your primary doctor the next day. It could be things such as buying your prescription drugs at the lowest cost place, and so helping our members discover where those opportunities are, and working with their physician or getting set up with different types of payment or different types of renewals for their prescriptions. 47% of our members are not compliant with recommended preventive care. So that's important to really look at here. If we're doing well with our preventive care and our members are proactively taking care of themselves, then we can see costs hopefully decline on the back end, and we're avoiding some of those more expensive interactions on the back end if they're taking care of themselves earlier, right? And then 8% of our members are not compliant with care plans for chronic conditions. So 8%, it's a small number, but some of these chronic conditions are very expensive conditions. And so the better off we are at helping our members be compliant to the care plans, then hopefully they're being taken care of, and then of course that will decrease the cost as well. Our dental plan is also, we haven't changed the rates for the dental plan this year. We're not proposing anything. The dental plan is doing very well. As you can see there, the district has an estimated about 310 in the reserve for the dental plan specifically, which runs at about almost 3.5 months worth of claims. And the claims per subscriber are down about 6% from this time last year. So no issues with the dental plan at all. Just the medical plan is the one that's kind of hitting us hard this year. A little hard to read here, but let me just wanted to offer just some more data for you to take a look at to underscore where we're at or highlight where we're at. If you look at the gray line on the bottom, do you have a pointer? Or you can see it on your computers maybe. The gray line on the bottom, that's where we're at year to date. So that's the claims that we've experienced year to date through March. If you look at the orange line on the top, that's the projected maximum costs that we would expect or could expect to see before our stop loss, our cumulative stop loss would kick in for this plan. We're not in danger of getting to that point, but it's a boundary that we want to be very cognizant of within our plan. And then in between, you can see that 101% expense ratio you see where the projected expected costs versus the projected funding right on top of each other. So basically at a 101%, right? So we're tracking pretty well, but it's very expensive. It's a very expensive plan to run. And then you see over here to the right, we have the reserve. And so the reserve, we started off at about 4.8, and the actual reserve year to date is about 5.276 million, and the target reserve is about 5.9. That's where we want to stay, around 5.9 million in the reserve at all times. So we're tracking well, and part of the reason for the rates being set so high or needing to be set high is to replenish what is missing from the reserve so that we can stay at our target or get close to our target. Okay. And then some information also just generally about the plan. We have about 1,000, a little over 1,000 subscribers or employees that are on our plan, and then cumulative with their dependents, it covers about 2,624 people total between our plans. Okay. And then again, just another graph to illustrate the payments year to date. So the payments year to date are up 19%, and you can see the growth over time here, 19% over last year. 5% over the year before. So, and what do we attribute that to? You know, coming out of COVID, perhaps you're starting to see people who are going to the doctor, maybe more elective procedures and things as they the freedom to go out and do the things that they would like to do. You also have just the everyday things that happen. We have not a huge number, but we have about a half dozen people on our plan who hit the stop loss for their individual care, and those can be very expensive claims as well. And we expect to see some of those claims continue into the new year. Probably expect around 8 to 9 people who would fall into that category again of eclipsing the stop loss. What questions can I answer for you about this?
Dr. Porbeni?
Thank you. Thanks for the presentation. So we do have, this is a self-insured plan, right?
Yes.
The accumulative cost, are you concerned about that? Because we're just in March, April, and we're already at, where are we at? Let's see, 13 million.
Yep. We're at 13 million. We expect to be at around 18 million. So we have April and May and June left. So there's 3 months left in the plan.
Okay. Oh, okay. So
Yeah.
3 months left.
3 months left in the plan. Most benefit years run
So we use
on
a
the
fiscal,
calendar.
okay.
Yeah.
All right,
If it
that
was
makes
December,
sense.
I would be sharing your concern. Right?
I was so worried. Self-insured plans can get expensive depending on how, depending on the usage. What are you thinking to do? Because this can change year to year. And it could get really expensive. It could be, less expensive depending on how much it was used, and we could get some money back. But you did say something about the point of care.
Mm-hmm.
What are you thinking to help so employees can be a bit more aware in terms of their collective health and how that impacts the budget, but not just the budget, but really wanting to make sure there's that opportunity for them to understand the importance of that collective care and how collectively we can all work together to get to a point where we don't have to always, so we're minimalist, let's put it that way.
Yeah.
So what are you thinking?
Yeah.
Because this can break the bank.
Yeah, absolutely it can, yeah. Well, I think the key is education, right? So people don't often know what self-insured means from an employee perspective. And so I think helping them understand that we write the checks and it's not somebody else who's writing the check, but that it comes from our own pocketbook is really important. But more important is really learning how the plan works and what they can do. So things like point of service, or getting prescriptions cheaper, or utilizing the low-cost interactions that we have outside, like the Well at Work clinic that we have at the high school right now. The Well at Work sees about 1,800, has about 1,800 visits a year from our employees, and has a really high satisfaction rating. So working with our employees to educate them on what are these alternative avenues for them to get low-cost care is very important. I think emphasizing wellness in general, if we can help employees understand what benefits we have that are going to lend itself to their overall well-being, will then in turn help decrease some of the costs associated with the plan. I think there's also some opportunity to look at plan design. So as we go forward, I'm not as well versed in what the history is of the design that we've had in our plan being newer, but I trust that there's opportunities to do some tweaking within the plan that would then help us also manage the costs.
How long have we been with Blue Cross Blue Shields?
Don't know.
Been there quite a while. I'm not sure.
Yeah, I don't know. We're all pretty new.
Don't know how long we've been there.
It's pretty expensive, and I think it's probably time to start thinking of an RFP.
We will,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah.
The other thing I would say regarding plan design is, we have really two plans here. I would highly recommend, and we will be, and I will be, I have quite a bit of experience with insurance, working with the insurance committee on taking a look at a third option. And so people can keep the options they have if they like them, or provide them a third option, which could save people money on premiums.
Yeah.
And so that's something we will be looking at late summer, fall, as we are preparing for the next year's renewal. Because, you know, I just, too many things going on to get too involved in the insurance renewal this year, but I will certainly be working with Bob and the team on looking at options for that.
Thank you. Director Hawker?
Thank you for this presentation. I've learned quite a bit about insurance that we have in our district. I'm just curious, with that 13% increase, who is responsible for absorbing that cost? Is it coming from our subscribers, or is it coming out of our general fund? Like, how does that work?
Can you say that again?
Who's absorbing the 13% increase in those premiums
The
too?
proposed rates would be to move it to the family, the family expense, the family premium.
Okay.
It's determined based upon the contract.
Okay.
So if we have contracts that say we are paying X amount of dollars towards a premium, and that premium goes up 13%, the employees, if that's the way the contract is structured, are bearing a large brunt of it.
Okay.
So that's why I think it's important for us as a district, as Bob has mentioned, to really educate employees on options available to them. And then we as a team can try and provide other options for plan design as well. So it's a significant factor for our employees going up at that.
Yeah.
That's the second highest rate since I've been a superintendent that I've seen.
Wow. That's huge. Director Petrie?
And I just wanted to follow up on what you said earlier, Dr. Funk, that you're going to take a look at this maybe later this fall when it's not quite so busy. Are you also going to be looking at just the big picture? I mean, is self-insurance the way to go? I mean, is that going to be part of your analysis as well?
It will. And so, you know, I've had experience in both worlds where we have been part of a pool and we've been self-insured. Most recently, I've had quite a bit of success with self-insurance, but it's not always the best. So absolutely, we will be working with a consultant to, you know, provide us background and analysis on the best way forward for our district.
Okay, thank you.
Yes.
So we're self-insured, but you also mentioned the stop loss, and just so I think I understand that, that's where we have additional insurance to override in case we reach that maximum?
There's two levels of insurance that we have on stop loss. One is an individual stop loss per member. So if they get into a situation where their expenses are really high, the plan stops paying at, and I forget, I think it's $200,000 for individual.
Okay.
And then there's the cumulative stop loss for the total expense of the plan. If the total expenses of the plan hit a really high mark, then we stop paying and insurance covers after that.
Okay, and we pay a premium for that, right?
Yes.
Yeah, it's part of the administrative fee that we pay to Blue Cross Blue Shield to administer our plan. Yep.
Right. Well, it would seem that, I'm assuming, is staff involved in, like, along the way in those conversations?
There's an insurance committee
There is,
made
okay.
up of employees from different bargaining units throughout the district.
Perfect.
That they're recommending, actually that committee has recommended to me to recommend to you this 13 point, whatever it is,
Okay.
1% increase.
I mean, but it is nice because there's a shared desire to get these costs down.
Absolutely.
And I mean, this is something that can be collaborated on to do
We'd like to
better.
talk about the, you know, the one badge, the union is really, one badge, that's what we are as a district, which I totally embrace. And this is an example of it.
Mm-hmm.
This impacts everybody.
Yes. Yes, Dr. Porbeni?
Thank you. So insurance, it's pretty expensive now for everyone, regardless whether it's self-insured or fully insured. Fully insured is really, really expensive. So I think there's some opportunity here with self-insured. However, I think all of the things that you've mentioned, whether it's fully insured or self-insured, there's a need for that total well-being, that orientation, that education for all of us, actually. Mm-hmm. So that's one way you can, you know, try to bring the cost down, regardless of where you go.
Yeah. No, I'm excited to have this reviewed and looked at, so, and glad to know that the process is already in place. If there aren't any other questions, I think we can move on. We will move on.
You motion to approve it.
Oh, I'm sorry. Guys, I'm like, I'm not looking at my normal agenda, so yes, this is not a report. This is an action item. Okay, we need a motion to approve. I'll go ahead and make the motion to approve, and is there a second? Okay, Director Kalsenberg makes the second. All those in favor tonight of improving item A, insurance renewal information 2324, raise your hand and say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion passes unanimously. Thank you. Our next action item this evening, Bob, you're going to stay right in your seat. We're going to have the resolution non-renewing probationary teaching contracts.
So
We'll
there
turn
were
it over to you.
two individuals
Okay.
that we needed to include in this, that were not a part of the previous that
Mm-hmm.
we brought to the board. So this is catching up and fixing the
And,
mistake.
and just so the board is aware, for a probationary teacher, the board actually has until June 30th to non-renew. So that's just by statute. So hopefully this will be the last couple we bring before you, but we do have the ability to do that until the end of June.
Great. I'm going to go ahead, I mean, there's really no question around this. I'm going to go ahead and make the motion to approve. Is there a second? Director Kelsenberg will do the second. All those in favor of approving the...
Can we do a roll call, please?
Oh, do we do a roll call for this
For
one?
this
Okay.
one, yes.
Joan will do the roll call.
Director Hockert? Yes. Director Kelsenberg?
Yes?
Director Lauer?
Yes.
Director Petrie?
Yes.
Director Porbeni?
Yes.
Director Thelander?
Yes.
Chair Sherman?
Yes.
Resolution passes unanimously.
So that resolution passed 7-0. Great. Now we will go on to, oh, can I have this? Yeah. Thank you. Oh, this will be very helpful. We're going to go on to the Northeast Metro 916 long-term facility maintenance budget. Mark, welcome.
Thank you, Chair Sherman, members of the board. Tonight, we are seeking approval for the long-term facility maintenance, or otherwise known as LTFM plan for Northeast Metro 916. 916 has the authority to levy dollars from their 13-member districts. This year, 916 is looking to levy for a total of $431,950, and then it's prorated amongst the 13-member district. Our portion of that is 9.96%, so that comes out to be $43,019. That amount will show up on our Stillwater's own long-term facilities maintenance plan when we bring it to you here in June. You'll see a little line item that has the 916 portion, that $43,000 within that. So this is a resolution that will need to be, I believe, a roll call vote. But before that, I will open it up to any questions or comments that any of you may have.
Yes,
I
Director.
assume all, you say 13 schools, are they all anticipated to pass the same resolution?
Correct, yep. They all have to pass it before this moves forward.
All right.
I'll make a motion to move to approve.
Okay. And I will second the motion to move to a resolution, so roll call vote?
Director Hockert?
Yes.
Director Kelsenberg?
Yes?
Director Lauer?
Yes.
Director Petrie?
Yes.
Director Porbeni?
Yes.
Director Thelander?
Yes.
Chair Sherman?
Yes.
Resolution is approved.
Great. So our Northeast Metro 916 long-term facility maintenance budget resolution passed 7-0 tonight. Thank you. And now we're going to welcome Marie Schruel, and we are going to talk approval of the 2023-24 preliminary budget guidelines and assumptions. Welcome.
Good evening, Chair Sherman, members of the board, Superintendent Funk. So this evening before you are the 2023-24 preliminary budget guidelines and assumptions. So this document before you is a guiding document of how we are preparing next year's budgetary calculations for our approval in June for next school year. And before you, again, what you'll see on most of the first page of the document is strategic plan guidelines. And those really are the guiding values of our district and how we are preparing the budget. What you'll also see is this is a transition year for us. This transition is what you'll see Carissa present in a later presentation this evening is our operational planning presentation guided by TeamWorks. that will show us finalizing some of our strategic planning for 2023-24 also. So you will see that this will be transitioning. We may be changing some of our guiding values and strategic planning information. But for now, this is how we're preparing our budget, and it may change over time. At the bottom of the document, you'll see our preliminary budget calculations for enrollment, and we did take a picture in time to roll out staffing for those enrollment projections as of February 20th of this year. And again, we do continue to look at our enrollment, and we will take into consideration as enrollment changes some of those staffing changes. So those will continue to be updated on a case-by-case basis over the course of the next couple months. The next page on the document, again, highlights our revenue projections and our expenditure projections. And as you all know, with the legislature, and I believe the superintendent might be highlighting some of that this evening, might be, you will see the revenue is pretty, we'll just say right now, questionable. But we are taking some assumptions with current law, with the exception of calculating I'll just say a conservative 2% increase within our Gen Ed per pupil formula. That rate currently is $6,863. I'm doing a $7,000 per pupil, so that's the 2% increase. Our levy revenue is based on the amount that was certified in December. So again, that was an overall 4.53% increase that was certified. And then our federal revenue, again, it includes all the entitlements, the American Rescue Plan, ESSER funding. That's based on all the preliminary information that's provided by the Minnesota Department of Education. So we get entitlement amounts, and we'll utilize the most updated information for all those estimates. On the expenditure side, the projections are based on our actual salaries. Again, we will be taking the most current staffing information with benefits, honoring all the labor agreements that we have. And those allocations are based on projected enrollment. And again, we're currently working on that expenditure side, doing projections, rolling information forward, taking those projections. And those rates will include rates for medical, dental insurance, as you just heard Executive Director Graff present some of those changes in rates, pension contributions. We have to take into consideration any of those rates changing. As you know, that's also pending. And just keeping mindful of what we must project. And then also certain non-salary expenditures, just keeping mindful of inflation. And then also making sure that any use of restricted fund balance categories, one example would be if we had long-term facility maintenance, that we're following our policy and statutory guidance. So again, this is a guiding document that will take us into the future, just so that we have something to point back to as we utilize this for priority budgeting. And then also our fund balance, in accordance with board policy on fund balance, the school district, again, will strive to maintain that minimum unassigned fund balance, general fund balance of 5%. And then before you also is a timeline. We will have that published out on our business and finance website. It will highlight also the upcoming May and June board meetings and those updates, and we will provide that. It's out on our website, and those updates to the budget. And then presentation format will provide summary information, but we will also provide that overview of all the budget document, highlighting summary and detailed information. And those presentations will also be available on our website. So that concludes the overview of the guidelines and assumptions. And at our board meeting next month is when we will get into more detail on the preliminary budget update.
Great. Thank you very much. I think this is, I don't know, I don't feel like we've seen this, a document like this before. It's very nice to see something like this laid out, so I appreciate that. That's not something we've had before. So I know that's your influence coming into this role, and so we appreciate that very much. Are there any questions? Yes, Dr. Porretti?
Thank you. Thank you. This truly was very well, put together and presented. I have a quick question, though. For the strategic plan objectives, are those for 2023, 2024? And those are the strategic plan objectives that we hope to accomplish in 23, 24?
I'll answer that. No. Those are the ones that are current.
Okay.
This document will be updated once we approve the operational plan moving forward. And you're going to get it, what Marie was alluding to is Carissa's going to be giving you an update on where we're at. She's going to show you some different strategic directions that aren't going to be necessary. So, and the other piece, as you noticed, is she did a 2% increase is what we're planning. You're hearing a lot of talk out of the legislature, and I'll update that as well, that it's going to, looks like it's going to be more than 2%. So the assumptions will be updated as we move forward here. But she wanted to get this in front of you while we could do it.
Yeah.
So my question there is, hopefully, because there's a budget surplus, right? So
Yes.
hopefully that trickles down much more than the 2% that we have here. It will have, this desired impact. The strategic plan, there's a statement there, or one of the items here is one that I think we should probably look into, and that's the all racial and economic achievement gaps are closed. This was the previous one. We know that hasn't been achieved. It's even worse. So I'm thinking that statement, we need to look into it, because these are expectations that year to year to year to year we've not been able to meet, but it still keeps, keeping on the.
Part of the rationale by providing you these assumptions is if these are our assumptions and these are strategic objectives we have for the district, what are we doing financially to shift our resources to meet those objectives? And so that's why it's spelled out here, and that will help you as a board make decisions when we come to say in the future, all right, we want to try this new program because it'll align with this strategic objective here. And finance will say, and here's what we'll fund for that. So it helps bigger picture with alignment.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I really do hope that there is that intentionality with respect to that particular item. Because it's true, we might be moving forward once we get the money for it, but does it really go to, to what we were talking about here? Or is it just an item that we're using to get the funds, but it doesn't really apply? Because, it's one of the biggest problems in the district is the achievement gap, not only here, but all over the state. And I think we can set a precedence in terms of what we're doing. So getting that opportunity and receiving those funds, the intentionality behind any type of plan with respect to closing that gap, I think is something that we should really, really pay attention to. That's the reason why I just mentioned it.
Great. Yeah, I do like this being a part of our priorities so that exactly like you said, Superintendent Funk, we can go back and say, okay, if this isn't meeting, or if it has nothing to do with the priorities we've established, why are we considering it? So just keeps us focused. So we'll go ahead and make a motion. I'll make a motion to approve the preliminary budget guidelines and assumptions. Is there a second?
Second.
Director Petrie, all those in favor of approving the preliminary budget guidelines and assumptions for the 2023-2024 year, raise your hand and say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion passes unanimously. Thank you, Marie. Now we'll move on to reports, and we have 3 reports tonight. The first one is our facility planning update, and welcome, Carissa.
Good evening, Board Chair Sherman, members of the board, Dr. Funk. Thanks for letting me be here today. Facilities usually hear Mark, but because I've been kind of helping lead this process, I'm going to talk through kind of a high level tonight of the work that we've been doing for the last several weeks, almost a little bit more than a month now. A lot of meetings have been taking place, and we're working really hard to think about what are the needs of our facilities as we move forward. So just a quick timeline of the work that we've done so far. It all started back in January, if you remember, when we looked at our demographic study and got to see what our enrollment projections are looking like. That information then helped us create a community survey, just really trying to find out from the community how they felt about our needs and what they thought as far as our projections with our community growing. We held a couple of community conversations with Anderson and Lake Elmo specifically, and you will know why in a little bit more as we get into this, of why we really called out those 2 schools. And then starting in early April, we started meeting with our facilities planning team. Our facilities planning team is made up of parents and community members, city officials, staff from across the district, really trying to represent all of the geographical areas of our district. And they, many of them were members of our original community design team. For those of you who have been around a while, that met back in 2019, 2020 to study our facility needs at that time. Their recommendations were kind of shelved because right as they were putting the recommendations out there, COVID happened. And so a lot of reasons why that work kind of came to a standstill, in part just because our schools were in a very different situation. We actually lost some students. It slowed the growth that we know is coming now. So that work was on hold, but certainly didn't mean the need was gone, as we will see as we continue through this. So at the very first meeting of our facilities planning team, Mike brought forward 3 priorities, and this is really the work that we look at every time we start a meeting. We look at these again. Our focus is to make sure that we're providing the best educational environment for our kids and that we're meeting their needs, that we're preparing for future growth because we know it's coming. We can see it when we look out our windows or drive down the roads, and that it needs to be fiscally responsible. We know our community has already supported us with a levy. They support us in a lot of ways, and so we don't want to have to go back and ask for more than we really need. So we're really focused on being fiscally responsible. In looking at our needs, administration is really focused on, or has been focused on 5 key things. Lake Elmo Elementary, we've been talking about this for a decade or more. I don't think there's many people who question the need for Lake Elmo to be replaced. So that was the top priority. Anderson Elementary came out kind of new. I think some people were surprised when they saw that, but as we get into it later, there's good reason why Anderson is being recommended to be rebuilt and replaced within the Bayport community if we can. We're also looking to remodel Oakland. Lake Elmo, Anderson, Afton, Lakeland, and Brookview all feed into Oakland, and those are the areas of greatest growth, so it's no wonder that Oakland is also going to need some additional space as more students are coming through there. We'd like to make some safety and security improvements across the district, also at Stillwater High School. We'll talk more about that one. And then the need for early childhood programming on the south side of the district has really come from our community asking for that. Lake Elmo and Woodbury are our fastest growing communities, and it's a drive for a lot of families to get up to our current location, so having that next location would be great. So we've had 3 meetings so far with our facilities planning team. The first was a lot of background and context. We dug into the demographic report with them. They got to see all the same charts and graphs that you saw, and got to understand where that growth is occurring and what it looks like for our school population, where we're going to start to see some challenges with schools just really reaching capacity. We looked at the CDT recommendations, so that's the community design team, and kind kind of refreshed our memory on what they had told us were the priorities back then, some of which we've been able to accomplish. So one of the things in this very building, the transitions program, was something that came out of that group, and we have been able to renovate some space here to hold our 18 to 21-year-old transitions program, and also working this summer to start construction on the ALC in this building as well. So Oak Park will really be utilized as envisioned through that group, so that's exciting. We also talked about what has changed, and I think the biggest change that we see is the growth is happening fast and furious, and it's not just in Lake Elmo, it's really kind of spreading in the southern part of district, and it's impacting schools beyond Lake Elmo and Brookview, which are the ones we've talked about. Afton, Lakeland, and Anderson are also seeing a lot of growth, so that's why the change in the plan a little bit was to look at Anderson as well. We toured a school in Hugo. It was really fun to see a new school and how it was laid out, a 750-student school that I think many of us felt was a lot smaller. Like when you walk into it, it didn't feel like such a big school. They did some things very intentionally to make it warm and inviting, small pods, areas where kids are really in small groups and they never are wandering or down big, long hallways. It was really a beautiful building. We also virtually got to see Prairie View Elementary, which is a school of over 1,000 students. It's in the Elk River District, so we weren't able to travel there, but we were able to see it virtually. And again, some really interesting design things they did to make a big school feel small. At our last meeting, we dug into Oakland and the high school and some of the district-wide security things, and also looked at future projects. So with that high level, I'll go through this quickly, but one of the things we talked about with Anderson is just that there are a lot of challenges with the current facility. First off, it's our smallest building. It's a very small building and already at capacity or very near capacity, so we don't have room to grow, and we are expecting more growth in that area, as well as Afton Lakeland, which is neighboring and has once, some of those students went to Anderson at one time and back to Afton Lakeland, so there's been a lot of changes there. There's really no room to expand that footprint. We've had some conversation about just maybe a little corner that we could, but you still have a lot of problems with parking and a lack of green space and some of those other things that it's just not an equitable experience for kids at Anderson compared to some of our other buildings. This was interesting. We started to look at what the Minnesota Department of Education recommends you have as far as acreage when you are having a school property, and they really say with a student population of 375, we should have about 14 to 19 acres. You'll see our existing is at 1.4 acres. So that means that we're really missing out on a lot of the amenities that other schools have. Again, the parking lots, that's always a challenge. Doesn't seem like maybe that impacts kids, but it does. As you're dropping off your kids and picking them up, there's just safety as kids are walking in between traffic and things like that. There's also no green space, no field space, a lot of those different things. We heard a lot when we talked with parents about the desire to have trails and nature and gardens and all these different things that this current site just doesn't provide. So opportunities, the ability to address the capacity of the growth area in Anderson as well as relieve some of that pressure at Afton Lakeland.
Could I ask you to go back really quick to this? I was just noting, because I don't think everyone knows this, but we have, the playground is on 0.7 acres of land owned by the city. Okay, just to clarify that.
You're talking about this at committee. I think it was Mark was saying, if you open the cafeteria door and step onto that little stoop to go down into the playground, you're actually on city land as soon as you open the door and step on that stoop. So it really is a great partnership we've had with the city for years to be able to have that, but just shows you again how small that footprint is.
Yeah, that's crazy. Okay, thank you.
Other opportunities is lower annual operating costs, staffing efficiencies. We have some shared staff at Anderson, and one of the things that Anna brought up as a challenge at Anderson is when you have shared staff, it's not always the most desirable position, so you have a lot of turnover there. So you might have music teachers or art teachers who are really only there for a year, and then they're able to get a job that's more permanent in one location or full-time, so you lose those relationships, which are so important at an elementary school level especially. There's a lot, oh yeah.
I'm sorry, because I've heard this now that from a couple people. Why it's a 0.5 position, is that a two-section, is it because there's two sections? At what point can it be a full-time position where that doesn't become an issue? Do we know that? Sorry.
Typically you get about 3 to 4 sections per grade level is when you get to be a full-time.
So then you don't have that
3 to 4
shared.
sections per grade level.
Okay, so you don't have that shared. I can see why that would be hard. Okay, thank you.
And currently, there just isn't enough classroom space for us to be able to expand to that, so that's really the challenge. We don't have designated specialist space. The art room is in the media center, for example, at Anderson. So there's a desire for just being able to have those designated spaces for our students. Flexible learning spaces, areas for kids to be pulled out into small groups or to work one-on-one with a volunteer or an interventionist or a special educator. We talked about the green space already and the parking pieces as well. So we really see a lot of opportunities to be able to replace Anderson, which is a more than 100-year-old building, with something that really meets the needs of our kids moving forward. Some of the same things I can say about Lake Elmo too. Lake Elmo also is over 100 years old, in the fastest growing part of our community and already at 95% capacity, so there's just no room for all the students that will be coming there. The building itself is physically located within the Rutherford attendance boundary, and that's always interesting for people to think about that, but it's just where our population is moving more to the south, the building is still located just too far north. There's limited specialist spaces. The gym and cafeteria are undersized. If you go there at lunch, it's just amazing the schedule they've had to work through to get those kids through that small cafeteria and get them back to class. There's some temporary classrooms that, I don't know, I've heard Mark say 10, 15 years. I've heard some people say almost 20 years that have been there. The city kind of gave us a variance to have them there temporarily, and they've become permanent fixture at Lake Elmo. Again, no flexible learning spaces. One of the things that was really powerful to the committee as they were listening to people talk about what's happening at Lake Elmo is you have students that are being pulled out for things like special education or other interventions, and they're in a hallway. So not only are they in a noisy area, they have kids walking past them. So as they're sometimes, kids can sometimes be mean, and if you're the one who's getting that extra assistance and you're out in the hallway where everyone can see you, that's really uncomfortable, and it really becomes a dignity piece for our kids. And that was really meaningful, I think, when the committee started talking about what that really means and how important it is to have those spaces, private spaces, where kids can get the intervention and support that they need. Same problem with limited parking and traffic flow. It's on a really busy road there, and they've had to do some things to try to improve that, but it's still not an ideal situation. And as an old building, there's a lot of deferred maintenance needs. Likewise, they're on a small footprint too. Recommended 17 to 22 acres for a school the size of Lake Elmo currently. They're on 12.8. We are really talking about building a 1,000-student school, or maybe even a little bit bigger, in order to meet the needs of both the Lake Elmo population and the growth expected, as well as Amigos Unidos, a desire to expand that program because it is proving to be very popular. You've heard that report already. There are kids who want to get into that program, so that would allow us to be able to expand. So opportunities, again, we'd have more room for the future growth, to expand Amigos Unidos, to move it further south to the population center, have those specialist spaces and the adequately sized gym and cafeteria, flexible learning spaces, and an improved traffic flow. We had conversations with the committee about why one big school? Wouldn't it be better to have two small schools, as the community design team had originally recommended? And in part, it comes down to cost. It's much more expensive to build two schools, about 20% less to just build one larger school, about $18 million we would be saving with one school, just in the construction costs. There's also lower annual operating costs. I know the board's had this conversation in the past. If you open another new school, you have to duplicate some of your admin, your support services. It just becomes more expensive. And as we mentioned with Anderson, you're more able to staff efficiently if you have a bigger school with more kids in it. We did point out, I've heard Mark say this several times, bigger school doesn't mean bigger class size. You're still using the same model that you use to determine how many teachers you need and how many administrators and all those sorts of things. So it doesn't mean that you have larger class sizes. We talked with the community at both Anderson and Lake Elmo, because these are big changes for those communities, so we wanted to get a feel for how they felt about it. We met with Anderson families at the end of March, right after spring break. There were about 50 people who came to that meeting, and overall, we kind of had a format where they had a presentation at the beginning, and then they went to 3 different stations and could rotate around. One station was talking about classroom learning spaces, another was about the outdoor spaces, and the final one was on community and specialty spaces. And just asked them to dream a little. What would they like the experience to be for their students? And this is the information that we heard from them. There was certainly a desire by some to stay in their current location, and there were questions about could we just expand and really be able to get what we need here in the current location. But other things that came up is they were looking for more natural light, more flexible learning spaces, small and large group spaces, the ability for it to be accessible. The old buildings, it can be challenging from an accessibility standpoint. There just weren't the same things in place 100 years ago as there are now. They wanted it to be safe and to have that small town feel that they really appreciate about Anderson. Green space came up. There is a desire for fields and gardens and trails and for kids to be able to be outside and do some exploring and even classroom kind of learning outdoors. They'd love to have dedicated playgrounds. At Anderson, there's just one playground. At some of our other schools, you'll know there's kind of the primary, and then the older kids have their own playground. Parking lot, safe traffic flow, and that desire to just be connected to both the community and nature. And they wanted spaces for music and art, natural light, spaces that are adaptable for special needs, large motor spaces, places for kids to be able to move, specific media center and tech space, larger cafeteria, and they want to stay somewhere within the community. Lake Elmo, similar conversation. There were about 20 people who came to the Lake Elmo conversation, and I think a little bit different from Anderson in that they're ready. I mean, I was surprised they didn't have sledgehammers over their shoulder ready to start pounding down that building. I think urgency is definitely what you're feeling from Lake Elmo. They are ready for a new building. I think staff probably agrees with that, right? I hear them back there. And just, we did have these same conversations with staff at both schools too, so we got input from our staff as well. A lot of the same things, flexible space, natural light. They wanted areas for younger students, like even bathroom areas, to have that kind of separated from the older students. They wanted designated private spaces for intervention, collaboration. Safety and security is something that comes up every time we talk to parents right now. Unfortunately, in this world, that is definitely a top concern. Flexible furniture, ample room for storage. If you've been to Lake Elmo, you'll get that. They're very creative in how they use storage right now. For outdoor spaces, more green space, nature trails, outdoor classrooms, parking, traffic flow, same things we've talked about. The outdoor obstacle course, I love that. They want like the Ninja Warrior course out in their backyard somewhere, so that would be pretty fun. We did tell them to dream. I think that was one of the dreams. For community spaces, a larger gym, large motor activities, an auditorium or performing arts space, green rooms, essential specialists to have their own spaces, makerspace STEM lab, and then larger media center and cafeteria. So now we're shifting gears to Oakland. As we get more students coming into Oakland, we really need to look at making that building bigger so we have room. So it's adding classroom spaces. It would also look to add gym spaces. We need that for teaching stations. You might not think about it, but our current gym is actually undersized in that building. There's not a lot of room already, and if you add another 300 students, you just don't have enough room for the Phi-Ed classes to have their gym, as well as we know that's a huge after-school activities and community rentals and all of those things. Gym space is always at a premium. The architects are really looking at improving the building at the same time, so not just slapping on a new addition, but to look at how we actually make the building work better. So there are places where they can improve circulation and just make it easier for traffic to kind of flow. There's some tight spots in a few places. They mentioned outside of the cafeteria, kind of a small hallway right there. As you have kids coming and going, it gets really congested. And they also have kind of random special ed classrooms scattered throughout the building and wanting to be able to move some of those things all to the same area and create true pods for your 6th, 7th, and 8th grade students. So a lot of opportunity there to just improve that building while at the same time increasing capacity. The high school, the entryway of the high school is a stress point. If you walk into the high school doors, there's kind of those 2 doors. You have to go into the main office in order to get into the building. One of the smallest, I think it is the smallest main office out of any of our schools for the largest building. So you have students and parents and volunteers and teachers all kind of coming in through that area. You have one person sitting at a desk. Even in our elementary schools, we often have 2 or 3 people in the main office. So if one goes to the bathroom or one is taking a break, there's still somebody else there. It becomes a safety thing too, just being able to keep track of who's coming and going in the building. That is all walled off too, so you can't see out to the rotunda. So they're talking about just making some different improvements to make sure that there's better visibility, that there's more people, so there's more eyes, and there's just more room for people to be able to come through there. So that's both a security improvement as well as just more space for the staff and the kids and the people coming and going. And the last thing we talked about was district-wide security improvements. As I mentioned, this is a hot topic for families in our community as a whole. We want to make sure that our buildings are as safe as they can be for our kids as they're coming in and out every day. So some of the things that we might be able to do if we were to have a bond is to look at some cameras, some security strobes, so that if we're on a lockdown and kids are in a music room where you can't maybe hear the loudspeaker, or if they're outside, they can see that light saying, hey, we're in lockdown, don't come back in. So that's something a lot of districts are moving towards. Security glazing, we already have this on most of our school entryways when we did our security bond several years ago and created those secure entrances. We did the glazing, but there are additional points of entry where we could put that would really prevent people from being able to shoot their way in or hammer their way in or whatever it is. And then finally, some perimeter door monitoring that would sound alarms if you have a door opening that shouldn't be opening. So those are some of the things that we can look at possibly doing to just increase security in all of our buildings. So it would be something for kind of everybody throughout the district. There were some things that we talked about too that are other priorities. We're starting to add up some of these things as we're going along, and it's getting to be a pricey endeavor. So there's definitely going to have to be a prioritizing of projects and determining how far we can go with what we know our community will support. Early Childhood Family Center is one that I think is at the top of the list. We've talked a lot about the high school auditorium. I know some of you, that's a project you'd love to see happen because we do have a small auditorium at our high school. There's a gymnasium at Afton Lakeland that's been talked about as needing to be expanded because it's undersized for a lot of our elementary schools. And then just district-wide, we know our buildings are getting older, so some of these new modern things that we talk about, flexible learning spaces in these areas where kids can kind of be pulled out, aren't in all of our buildings, so we'd love to be able to do some of those district-wide as well. So next steps. We are having our final facilities planning team meeting coming up in 2 weeks on May 9th. They will put together a recommendation that we'll be bringing back to you in June. From that recommendation, we would probably want to go out to survey the community again, and now that we have more details of what we'd like to do, we can measure it and see how the community feels about it, and just like the first survey, get some good information for you as you're making decisions. The school board would ultimately have until mid-August, I believe it is, to determine whether or not they want to hold a bond referendum, and if you do, that would happen in November. So that's the timeline. Any questions?
Yes, Director Petrie.
Thank you for this. This is really helpful, and I think the community will probably really appreciate having this information. One of the things that I was really interested in, kind of zeroed in on, was what seems like a seismic shift in the way we educate students, and how the building plays a role in that. You know, buildings that were built 100 years ago were probably the sort of approach to education where the teacher stands in the front of the room and there are rows of desks and just, speaking all day long to those students. And that's just not the way we educate students these days. And so I wonder if you can talk just a little bit more about, why this new approach, is really necessary if we're going to give students the best opportunities. I mean, we have something like that in Brookview, but, if you can talk a little bit more about your experience with this newer school up in Hugo that you toured, I think that would be useful.
I think, and I'm not in the school every day, but I think when I do go into the school, it really stands out to me how different it is, because you walk into a classroom and it's not, very seldom do I see kids just sitting at their desks or sitting at a table. There's a group of kids in the corner that are working on a project over there together. There's a student over here doing something individually. There's a teacher with a small group here. There's some kids that are being pulled out into the hallway. So as we talked about, there's just a lot going on. What's cool about our schools is that we're really trying to personalize and individualize and meet kids in their different how they learn, right? Some kids need to be active and moving around. You'll see kids, even during reading time, some laying on the floor with their feet up on the wall, others sitting at a desk, some sitting in a comfy chair. I saw one little kindergartner kind of standing on his head with his book. I don't know what that was, but that's what they need. They need that movement, and so they just need these creative spaces to be in. So when we were at the school in Hugo, similar to Brookview, they have pods, but theirs were laid out a little bit differently. It almost felt like you walked into kind of a family room. There was just sort of this small place with all these comfy, cozy chairs and different seating areas. There was a place where, you know, a screen was on the wall where someone could present. It just felt really cozy and homey. And then off of that, there were these different classrooms that kids could go into, and they have a different approach there where each classroom's a little bit different. Like one is the messy classroom where you can do art and science activities right in that pod. You don't even have to walk down a long hallway to get to an art room. It's right there. So it was kind of interesting how they laid that out. But I think the idea is in these larger schools, you're trying to create a small community, almost a family just right here. So you're not in this big, huge building with 700, 800, 900 kids. You're in with maybe 150 kids, and these are the kids that you're with and the teachers that you're with every day for maybe 80 or 90% of your day.
I think another thing with school design is, you know, the concept of collaboration among staff. So we may have pods, we may have classrooms, but you may be able to open up the classrooms and suddenly 2 classrooms are together. Or you can go outside the pod into the family room areas, as Carissa was mentioning, and you can do things out there collaboratively if you've got, you know, a pull-out program for gifted kids, or you have win time, so your kids are working on different things, not only within the classroom, but elsewhere within the learning area. So it truly has changed from the everyone sit in rows and listen to the teacher at the front, and what we're seeing is not only with classrooms, but with furniture, how we're adjusting to meet the needs of the learners, as she was mentioning, kids in different, you know, ways that they're physically learning.
And I would assume then that there are limits on the how we can adjust our current buildings to be able to adapt to that new way, that more individualized way of educating students.
Absolutely. Go ahead.
Yeah, I think that was one of the things we were seeing as we walked through some of our older buildings is they really are made long hallways with classrooms with doors, and it's really shut off. And if you want to collaborate, you have to go to some other space, but there aren't usually a lot of other flexible spaces. You might have a media center, or you might have, you know, that's pretty much what you have in some of those schools. So the opportunity to have classrooms that open up to each other, expand into bigger areas, as Dr. Funk was saying, or big open areas where you can bring several classes together for projects or performances.
Thank you.
Dr. Kelsenberg?
Yeah, so a lot of what's going to come forward here is from the facilities planning team. Can you remind me what the makeup of that is, and are these people engaged? Do we have administration involved with that?
Yeah. It's a really good group. We have 15 to 20 really actively engaged who have been participating in all of the meetings, and they are parents, some staff members, administrators, and community leaders. So we have mayor, city council, some of those, especially in our impacted communities, ones that we're talking about with all of the growth. So a lot of wonderful conversation, a lot of background and experience. Many of them were part of the original planning process, so they have that context with them as they're coming forward to have this updated conversation.
And who is facilitating them?
We have a team of us. So Mark and I are doing a lot of the internal facilitation, and then we're working with Wold and Krause Anderson as well to be kind of our building and architect experts to help guide the process too.
Okay, thanks.
Great. Other questions? Dr. Hucker?
Thank you for this presentation. There was a lot of really good information. Kind of pulling back to Dr. Petrie's comment about the kind of new spaces that are available. One thing that really struck me from the parent community member conversations was the nature piece, and how it's not just the learning spaces inside a facility, but also a desire to have outside integrated into the learning environments as well through natural light and outdoor learning spaces. So that kind of struck me as something that our community sees as important, and in educating a whole child and kind of allowing them to engage with their environment in different ways, I see value in that as well. One piece that I also noticing the pattern is the security piece, and in having these more open collaborative environments, just kind of thinking through how is that going to work from a security perspective, and kind of how do we prioritize and leverage flexibility with security. And hopefully, I totally trust you guys to figure that out, but that's just kind of in the back of my head. And then one actual question that I'm getting to, I did notice from the summaries that you guys sent us from these conversations, there were some questions that kind of came up. And one of those questions was a desire to know the locations of where these new replacement schools are going to be. And according to this presentation, it looks like we're going to try to stay in both Lake Elmo and in Bayport. And I was trying to figure out how confident are we in being able to meet that? Or do we anticipate any challenges in kind of in finding those locations and being able to make good on that goal?
You want to jump in on that one?
Sure. So, unique challenges in both communities. Lake Elmo, as you are aware, is the fastest growing community in Minnesota. So with the fact that it's the fastest growing community in Minnesota, any vacant land is a hot commodity. So we are looking at a number of pieces within Lake Elmo. And, you know, I believe we will be successful in that endeavor. Bayport is a little bit more landlocked, but we have been working with the Bayport City Administration and identifying some potential spots within the City of Bayport itself. We will likely be meeting with Bayport community leaders here sometime in the near future. Our preference is to build new in Bayport with green space and meeting the needs of, you know, I think the thing that stood out for me in that report was the MDE's recommendations for space. And that's like a minimum. And you saw where we were, you know, particularly in Bayport with that recommendation. So really meeting the needs of our students, providing the green space necessary, the nature necessary, a large enough building to accommodate the needs for the future growth. So our preference is to be in Bayport and is to be in Lake Elmo, and that's what we're moving towards.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Yes, Director Thielander.
Well, thank you again. You know, I think this is I appreciate you keeping the board informed and having a very prudent process that's being followed, which, you know, I think from our stance, I think that's very important. And obviously, there still seems to be a lot of work and conversations to be had within the next steps, but it's laid out very well. So, you know, I think as we look at what's been done thus far, it still seems like it's a smaller representation of maybe some of these conversations, and that's what I look forward to, hopefully, with you know, additional planning team meeting, additional community surveys, be able to pull in more of the, you know, the communities. You know, I think that's going to be very helpful. I think as a board, we always have to be focused on doing what could be best for students, but, you know, we also have to be mindful of other stakeholder input, you know, especially around communities that can cause a lot of disruption. So I think we have to be very thoughtful about that approach. But I think if you could help, you know, as part of this process, I think it's the way I approach anything or any type of investment is what's that trade-off of the risk versus reward? And what's the opportunity cost of not doing one action versus another? So I think that's an opportunity that we have to continue to educate the community as we have these conversations to better understand what does that look like and what's the cost of not doing some of these things that are being recommended from a state level. and based on our own unique needs of a district. But, I do appreciate the process that's being done. I just look forward to continued conversations of what does that look like to make sure that we're gathering in all that input from across the board. And I think that's a community opportunity as well to make sure that that's being shared from all stakeholders. So thank you for your work with this.
I had a comment. I appreciate Superintendent Funk. I appreciate the 1, 2, and 3 priorities, because I think if we can keep that front and center, some of these decisions become a little easier to make, because it's really truly focused on the kids and our responsibility also to taxpayers to meet these needs in the most efficient way possible while we're planning for all this growth. I hear from community members often about wanting to know everything we need and kind of fully exploring all of the district's needs. So when I look at the list of, I know our tax tolerance, our threshold, we're probably looking at that, right, carefully, the $15 to $20 that was from the last survey. But we do have like ECFE, even the Afton Lakeland gym. It's a very small gym. That's a need. Different schools maybe to try to kind of, enhance the experience for our students. Are those kind of going away, or will you be looking at those and just so we have the information we need and the community as well?
I don't think they're going away. I think the plan with the facilities planning team is to prioritize, kind of here's the things that we think definitely need to happen, and if we were to happen to get extra money, these are the other things that we think should happen too. So I don't think any of it's going away. Some of it could potentially be an additional question on a bond. Some of it could be a future bond, or there might be priorities we try to work creatively on other solutions for. I don't know what that might be, but we talked about for safety and security, for example, are there things that we can do through some other means, just with long-term facility maintenance or other possibilities? So I think the intent for this group is to come forward with the needs are out there, and then we just have to figure out what we can afford at this time.
I would answer that in a twofold manner. The short term, you have some exceptionally pressing needs in this district. And when we say exceptionally pressing, if we go to the voters in November and this passes, we're probably not going to see anything completed until 2026.
Yep.
And we're talking a 10-year time frame here. Of 10 years, we're expecting on the low end 1,000 more students in the district. So you have a short-term window of that's what the facilities team initial recommendation will be to you. I also believe that you have an opportunity as a board, and we do as a district, to take a look at some more strategic long-term needs. We mentioned the gym at Afton Lakeland. Yes, that's Lake Elmo and Afton Lakeland have the 2 smallest gyms in the district, but we don't have full-size gyms at Lily Lake. We don't have full-size gyms at Stonebridge. We don't have a big enough auditorium at Stillwater Area High School. So what I would suggest, and again, we can be working with finance on this, is take an analysis of our bonds. When are the bonds going to be dropping off the books? And at that point, we can strategically say, okay, if these are some long-term needs of our district, then when this falls off, we can go to the community and say, well, let's add these 2 things, and it'll be a zero tax impact on the taxpayers. So we owe it to you as a administration, working with the facilities team, to not only identify these short-term needs, but how we can really upgrade the district over time, in addition to what we're doing with long-term facilities.
Perfect. That sounds wonderful. Any other questions? Great. Well, thank you very much for that update. And I'm assuming will this go on the website so people can maybe look at the presentation, and it just would be helpful. I know I'm telling people a lot that that's kind of the go-to place to have everything, so.
We actually have a page you can go to easily, stillwaterschools.org/growth, and that's where we're going to continue to post information as this process goes through. So there's a little bit of info there, and we can continue to add to it. So stillwaterschools.org/growth.
And that is what I'm giving people, so that's great. Thank you. Great. All right, now we're going to move on to Report B, which is the operational planning update, and I believe you're staying
That's me again. We're doing a lot of planning right now. So now we're going to talk about operational planning. And Marie alluded to some of this earlier, that we are looking to update our strategic plan. We're changing it from a strategic plan to an operational plan. In part, strategic plans are the dusty books that sit on a shelf that nobody actually does anything with. And an operational plan is really intended to be something that is constantly adapting and evolving, and something that we're looking at on a daily basis, really, to guide our work. So we started this process back in November, I believe. We're working with TeamWorks, international consultants, to help us go through this process. We started by doing focus groups with staff, students, and families to get some input from them on what they would like their daily desired experience to look like. So ultimately, what do they want out of their school? For a kid perspective, what should it be like when I go to school every day? What kind of experiences do I want to have? And then also from a staff and parent perspective. So all of that information from the focus groups was gathered, was turned into a survey that went out to an even wider group of staff, students, and families to find out if we were on track with what we heard from these focus groups. Was this really what people wanted? And then that data from both the focus groups and the surveys went to an operational planning team. So we've had a planning team that's been meeting for several months now, and it's made up of staff from across the district in all sorts of different areas. So we have teachers, administrators, support staff. I'm actually going to read something to you that I just got from a custodian who serves on that committee. He just was out of nowhere, sent me an email today, of all days, very timely, to let me know that he would really appreciate being part of the committee. So he said, when he went into this, he wasn't exactly sure what we were trying to accomplish, but over time the focus became clear and the purpose more defined. I think there's a tendency when there's a project like this to come up with some current buzzwords, craft them in a safe, polished package, and put them on the mantle. The difference here is that the follow-through, the measurements, the accountability, the timeline were connected directly to each of our goals. As a staff, I think we have a tendency to undervalue our contributions. It was a great experience for me to be part of a committee where a custodian's perspective and input was as of much value as a superintendent or a principal. It takes each and every voice to come up with a plan of success. So I thought that was really powerful for this process, to have someone be able to say that in those words. So with that, as I mentioned, the foundation of this plan is the desired daily experiences. So after all that work, here's what we came up with. And we tried to be very intentional about keeping the words as they were said by the staff, students, and families. So this language is very much what the kids said. First and foremost, they want to feel safe, seen, heard, and accepted at school, and for their individuality and diversity to be valued. They want to be supported by people who care about their academic success and their mental and physical well-being. They want teachers who are great and who can help them learn through a variety of real-life courses, experiences, and opportunities that keep them engaged and prepare them for life. They want to understand the rules and expectations and see staff applying them consistently. They want to like being at school and having time to connect with friends, get their work done, and have access to the things that they need. So these are the things kids are wanting out of our schools. Families, similarly, that first one, they want their children to be seen and valued for who they are. They want them to be part of a safe community that's kind, loving, and respectful of each other. They want their children to love learning and have the opportunity to be challenged while they explore a variety of experiences and activities. They want their child's learning to be individualized and sensitive to the cultural needs of all. They want teachers to partner with them so that they know what's happening in the classroom and can support the academic and behavior needs at home. And they want to receive consistent communication from school and be connected to the school community as a whole. Staff want to be valued and respected members of the school's learning community, which is inclusive and welcoming for all. They want to be part of an environment that's focused on academic rigor and excellence for all students. They want to feel safe and secure and know how to respond when disruptions occur. They want to have access to resources, time, and professional development that's reflective of their needs and the needs of students. And they want consistent district and school structures and processes that ensure their voice is heard and their needs are considered. So again, this is really the basis of the plan. So as we understand what it is that people are asking for from our schools, we are able to put together the next step of the process, which is a classroom theory of action. And the way this works is basically saying, if we do these things, then we're going to reach our mission. So again, if we just demonstrate our belief that students can and will learn within a safe, brave, caring, and inclusive environment, and we create an environment where students are highly engaged, heard, and active in their learning, with choice and flexibility and in collaboration with each other. And we collaborate with families as valued and important partners in student learning. And we provide flexible and multiple modes of instruction, assessment, feedback, and learning for each and every student. And we utilize research-based standards-aligned and high-quality core instructional and engagement practices. And we provide diverse, meaningful, and culturally inclusive instruction, assessment, and learning that involves the whole child. And we engage in a data-driven and collegial professional learning process that improves learning experiences, academic outcomes, and social and emotional growth. Then we will realize our mission for all students. So these are then, I think this is sort of what you were alluding to earlier, Annie. These are the ways that we're going to know that we are actually closing those achievement gaps and making sure that each of our students are achieving the best that they can. So this is the classroom theory of action that was put together. And ultimately, this leads up to operational strategic directions. These are the high-level directions. Underneath all of these things, you will learn later. We're not getting into this tonight, but when you work with TeamWorks in May, you'll start to see what the actual operational plan looks like. So in each year, what are the actual tactics and strategies we're going to be doing to help us reach these goals? But ultimately, one direction is about learning. A is that we ensure the learning process is adaptable and that it meets the individual needs of students. Strategy B is about safe, welcoming, and inclusive environments. Strategy 3 is about utilizing our systems and aligning our resources in an efficient manner and to support learning. And D is about developing strong partnerships with the communities we serve. So these would be the directions where all of our work would kind of align and help us reach our overall goal, which is making sure that we're educating our students and taking care of them. So the next steps in the process is for you to do some work. You get to have Dennis Cheeseborough come back in early May and create a school board governance work plan. You're going to be able to set your goals, define the district's vision, and create guiding change documents that come back to us as we do our work, kind of setting those boundaries for us of what's acceptable and what we need to be looking at as we move forward. Then we'll finalize an operational plan. Once we have that finalized, we can go back as staff and do the real work, which is creating district and school vision cards. A vision card is where we really take those goals and define the work that we're going to do as a department or as a school to make sure that we are meeting the overall goal and reaching our vision. You will learn a lot more about this at the next meeting. This is meant to just kind of be a sneak preview for you to understand what has happened so far. But I definitely invite any questions that you have at this time.
Great. We'll open the floor for questions. I just have one comment, and I think this is something that the board has wanted for a long time. It already feels like so much work has been done. And so I think just some of the changes in the personnel and the staff members and everyone working together this is already coming a long way. So I'm thoroughly thrilled at the course that you're on. Mm-hmm.
I would agree with that. I love looking at these desired daily experiences for the students and the families and the staff. This is highly aspirational, but it seems to me that this is exactly what we as a school district should be aiming toward. And I really appreciate that, and I look forward to more steps in the process. Can you just give us an estimate about how many people may have been involved in this so far with providing the input? Because I think that what is here is exceptional. I'm just sort of wondering how many people might have been involved in that.
Yes, so don't have exact numbers. Focus groups were hundreds. Surveys was more than that. I think we probably had more than 1,000 people that responded to the surveys if you look at the staff, student, and the parent surveys. Our planning team is about 25 to 30 people, I think, that are on that planning team. And then ultimately, as we get more reaction, as we take this out to the community, they'll have more feedback at that point too. But yes, we've had a lot of voices involved in this process.
Wonderful, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's going to be excellent for the board too, the way you're describing it. And I think it was Superintendent Funk that said, you're going to have benchmarks, timelines, so if something isn't happening, we can change course, try something different. But to have all this laid out so we know how we're doing and if we're doing what we need to be doing, and we can change course earlier on than maybe we have as an entire district in the past. So I really just can't say enough about how thrilled I am with where this is going. Yes, Director Hockert.
I just want to go back to the quote that you read at the beginning of this from our custodian, and how well that really kind of hits the nail on the head of strategic planning, and how this process, the way we're doing this, is so different than I think maybe we've done it in the past. And it makes me really hopeful to kind of see where this all leads. And I really appreciate, Dr. Funk, that you're leading this up for us. So I'm really encouraged. And looking at already what staff and students and family have identified as what they would like from our district, to me it's really hopeful, because it really is showing that we really do want to move from more of the industrial model of students as workers, and as workers who kind of think and move and do stuff, into students as little humans who are learners and are growing over 12 years into more integrated people who are going to go out into the world and be successful. So, and that ties back into our learning environments as well, and how we need to adapt those into little learners instead of little workers. So I'm really hopeful with all of this work that's being done, and it all kind of ties together. Yeah, thank you for this presentation. It was great.
All right. Thank you very much, Carissa.
Thank you.
And more to come, so we're excited for that. And the next and last item for tonight is a legislative update.
Well, since my last one got so many headlines, I thought we'd save this for last tonight. So, real quick, this will be pretty brief tonight. What I provided with you tonight is where the House is at with their omnibus bill and what they've approved so far. I can talk a little bit about the Senate here, but the Senate, I just contacted somebody about 5:59 right before we started. They're still in the middle of working through their bills. So the House bill, and this first slide is really good news for the district. Okay, so I really want to emphasize the positive here. All right, they've passed a bill that increases 4%, and I don't think I've seen ever as a superintendent a 4% increase for school districts in the general ed formula. So that's a positive. 4% year one, 2% year two. 2% is what I typically see every single year. And then they're going to index it in future years to inflation capped at 3%. So this is a good thing and a bad thing. So what'll happen is if we put this inflation index in place and inflation is 3% or more, we're going to get a 3% increase. If inflation goes back to how it used to be and is a 0.7 or a 0.6, this could be harmful to education, because they'll just say, see, we're just tying you to the consumer price index. So that is, it's really double-edged, and people are focusing on that 3%. I'm focusing on what happens when we don't have high inflation. So I think that that's important to keep in mind. Most school districts throughout the state, or school organizations throughout the state of Minnesota, MSBA, AMSD, C, MREA, are advocating for 5 and 5% with a in addition to that, with a inflationary index as well. The Senate's plan is 4 and 5% at this point in time. And again, I don't know where that's at as of right now. The House passed increased funding for the special ed cross subsidy of 47.8% for next school year. So that's a big win for the school district. I think our cross subsidies are around $12 million. So that's very much significant for more aid for the school district. They plan on incrementally going up a little bit there. English language learner cross subsidies about 33%. That will continue to go up as well. I think in 2 years' time, I think they're looking at 67% or closer to 70% for that. So again, those are really good news for the district, especially with our English language cross subsidy, or English language learner population increasing. They are going to maintain the compensatory aid at current levels. As you're well aware, they have passed the universal free lunch meal, or universal free lunch plan, which impacts our compensatory aid, because our compensatory revenue that we receive from the state of Minnesota is based upon our free and reduced lunch numbers. Well, if we're providing free lunch to all of our kids, people who fill out the paperwork for free and reduced are going to go down significantly. So they're holding us harmless at this point, but they don't have a real fix in place. So that's a long-term potential concern for the district as we move forward. Another good news story in the House bill is they are authorizing school boards to renew an expiring operating levy at the same level. So last time you went out to renew your levy, if it was a 7-year renewal or a 10-year renewal, then when the next time you go back, you won't have to go to the voters. You can do it here as a school board saying, we want to renew the current levy that we have in place. So that's, I have been advocating for that for probably 6 or 8 years. So it's good that that's finally going to happen. That will save a lot of wear and tear on your administration from having to go out and convince the community to maintain our tax dollars at the current level. So those are some highlights. Areas of concern, requiring the negotiation of class sizes and students to personnel ratios. So the concern there is, and I'll just give you an example of real life, particularly in the fall of the school year, late summer, we have kids coming and going, and we are trying to make staffing decisions and allocations based upon that. If suddenly we have something in a contract that says, okay, class size has to be, 30 or less, and we start the school year with 32 in a classroom, and then 3 weeks into the year, maybe 3 of those kids move out, okay, we've already hired another teacher because we're at this 32, we're over the cap, so we'd have to hire another teacher. And then if kids leave, then we wouldn't have had to hire another teacher. There's a lot of administrative concern over what that looks like and how that would even be done. I know the Senate is taking that very issue up tonight as far as whether that they're going to pass it on their side. And I like to think, we've been a school district since 1850, and we haven't had to have a state law that says we need to negotiate class sizes. I think we've been able to work with our partners within the SCEA to do it right, and I would hopefully we can continue to do that moving forward. The next one, making hourly employees eligible for unemployment benefits during the summer break without a funding mechanism for schools. So here's the answer I got on that today, because the Senate is again taking this up as we speak. And so I heard today from a state senator saying, well, we are providing funding for schools for these people who you're having to pay for unemployment benefits for the summer. So I asked the question this afternoon, how are you providing for that funding? Well, we're going to give you 4% increase on the general formula, and 2% of that can go to paying for that funding. So that's great for this year and next year. But what's going to happen in 2 years' time when that piece will still be in play because it's now the law and we're not receiving funding for it?
Right.
Okay, that's a classic example of what I'm talking about when we're speaking unfunded mandates. So there's no mechanism in place to say, okay, if we're going to have this, the legislature is going to take this money aside and dedicate this moving forward to help districts pay for this. Instead, what's happening is our community will hear, oh, you're getting 4% extra dollars, but we're going to encumber you with these extra costs that we're not going to talk about publicly because we're not looking at them. So for the benefit of the district, for the benefit of our employees in the district, I am really asking the state, if you're going to be looking at providing this piece, set aside a funding mechanism for it. The other concern that I have is, and this one is more operational with the second bullet here, is, okay, we're going to start saying that our hourly employees can now receive unemployment funds for the summer months. What's this going to do to our extended school year services or targeted services when we have summer school for kids who need para support. We have been told by DEED, the Department of Economic Development, that if a teacher does not want, or not, excuse me, if a hourly employee does not want to work the summer for a school district, because it's only a summer employment piece, they would still qualify for unemployment. So we very well, in the next few weeks, because this looks like it would be going into effect this summer, could be seeing a financial cost to the district and a employee shortfall to meet the needs of our summer school students. So that hasn't passed the Senate yet, but again, that's out there right now. And then the last one is very concerning from an operational angle. And it's limiting the administrator's discretion in kids K through 3 in student discipline and their ability to keep students and staff safe. So what that means is if a student brings a weapon to school or something serious, we do not necessarily have the ability to suspend them, depending on which version of this bill gets passed. And so, you know, and I keep on going back to the 6-year-old student in Virginia who shot his teacher. If this bill were in place, sorry, yep, family might be in trouble, but the student still gets to be in school because we cannot exclude them. So, and I get the intent behind it. My belief is if we want to do what's best for our kids who are struggling, then provide us more dollars for counseling support and social workers instead of putting a rule in place saying, sorry, you can't suspend little kids if they're doing extreme things. So that's concerning. Other bill of note with likelihood of passing, and I talked about this last time, is paid family and medical leave. And the conversation I had this afternoon, I said, are they still at 24 weeks? And they're still at 24 weeks. So 12 weeks paid medical leave, 12 weeks paid family leave, and we'd be paying for it through payroll taxes. So district would have a portion. I think our employees would have a portion. And then employees would get 90% of their wages reimbursed. And then once again, the concern operationally is the costs associated with this bill do not include the payment of the substitutes. So that's just coming out of the district's dollars. So I just want to make clear, I don't have a judgment on, well, I do on the non-exclusionary discipline. I think that is not good for school districts. But I don't have a judgment on the paid family and medical leave. And go back a slide, Joan, if you can. And, you know, I think that it's great if the state wants to say that people can be unemployed if they're only, 10-month employees, okay, that's what the state wants. But my concern is we're not getting funding for these things. And my concern as superintendent is meeting the needs of this district, our staff, and our students. And when the state is coming down and saying, well, we want to do these things, but we're not going to give you any more funding for it outside of what you're getting in the formula, that's a concern for me. So, subject to your questions.
I'll open up the floor. Director Kelsenberg?
Sure. So it looks like there might be a 4% funding increase. Now, Marie just gave us a presentation based on a 2%. What'll happen with that 2% if we get it? Because that will be for 23, 24, right?
Yeah, again, I think that's a great question because, and she gave you a budget assumption of 2%. Well, from the conversations I had today, if you get a 4%,
you get 2.
You're going to take 2% of that and you're going to pay for that summerly unemployment cost. So her assumption is probably more accurate than getting 4% from the state because of the fact that they're not giving us the additional revenue for that. So great question.
Okay.
Yes, Director Hoggart.
So I've heard the argument that with the paying for unemployment for school workers over the summer, that in other industries like construction and other areas, more private industry, they regularly pay unemployment for workers when jobs dry up or whatever. So how, and then the argument is that it's unfair for our school employees that every summer they kind of have this big gap in pay. So I guess my question is, how do we compare as a school district to more of the private sector using unemployment for kind of temporary gaps in employment?
We're different than most places because they don't have, I mean, with the exception of the construction workers you're talking about. Yeah, I think that is not in the summer, but in the winter months, they would have that. No, and that's where I say, okay, there is some logic to it, but the illogic is, okay, we've came up with the idea we want to pay these paras over the summer months, and we're not going to help you pay for them. So that's the concern. But the bigger concern is, I think if you were to ask anybody who's in charge of targeted services or extended school year, I would say that the vast majority of our paras, if they wanted to work in the summer, could. Whether it's adventure club type stuff or extended school year, or, and it's not maybe full summer, but there's opportunities for them in the summer to work. So, but the philosophical side of it is it's consistent with what you're saying about construction workers. My concern is they're not paying for it.
I guess my comment to that would be, if you're a private sector, you have the ability to raise your cost. Like if you're paying for that, I mean, we can't raise, we don't charge for what we provide. So, right? I mean, I guess I'm thinking in the case of a private company, or if you have something for unemployment, you raise the price that you charge your customer.
We have a finite, I mean, we get funding from state and federal sources in our community, but we can't suddenly say, okay, it costs us more to educate a student because we have to pay these people in the summer. We just get what we get.
Right. That's what but it's a good question, because I guess I'm thinking about that too, so.
And I think that's the logic behind it. It's exactly what you said, is if these construction workers are getting it in their downtime in these months, why aren't our hourly employees?
But just so I'm clear, if we offered a job, to say we have a summer job, we can't.
I believe the
Okay.
deed told the school organizations on Friday that they don't have to accept it.
Okay.
Because it's not permanent, it's not long-term, because they're, the other thing that I have seen with and this was more COVID-related, when people were laid off, maybe because of COVID, if you're not guaranteed a job, if you're guaranteed a job in the fall, you don't qualify for, it used to be you don't qualify for unemployment. So that's the harder part, is if we have these people who are contracted 10 months throughout the year, we know they're done on this date, we know they're starting on this date, and now the state's saying, yep, and now the state's going to say, school district working with unemployment, you are going to pay them for these 2 months that they're not working. So that's the bigger concern.
Yeah. And again, I appreciate you saying that it's not that you're arguing the intent because I don't think any of us would in many of these. It's the funding piece, that if it's there, if it's being taken off of something that we're planning, we're hoping to be able to plug holes that we know we have for our students. And if that money's being kind of taken right off the top.
And I guess I would say on the hourly summer employment one is looking at it from the lens of how is this going to impact our district. Okay, so yes, it's going to impact us financially, but I'll be able to tell you in a few months how much I like this when we look at what our staffing looks like for our summer programs. So that's still out there too. And again, that's the lens I'm trying to look at this through, is how are these laws or proposed laws and bills impacting us as a school district in meeting the needs of our students and our staff.
And just again, I appreciate it because I feel like I've gotten more legislative information this year. And so I fully understand, I feel like, the impact or the potential impact, both operationally and otherwise. So I definitely appreciate these updates. Any other questions for Superintendent Funk? Great. All right, with that, we are adjourned. Thank you.
Thanks.